Hello there. So, in this lesson, we're going to talk about spaced repetition. You've probably already heard of it since you're probably from Anki, or maybe you watched some video on YouTube and they described this spaced repetition with all this fancy graphs and everything. I'm going to give you a quick rundown because it's spaced repetition is a principle. It's the principle on which SuperMemo is based on, but I don't want to go into the graphs. I don't want to give you too many data because you can find that from other people. Like if you Google it, you Google spaced repetition, there is a lot of material and it's probably done way better than what I could in a quick lesson. Okay, there are entire websites dedicated to it, so Google it. If you're not satisfied by this explanation, just Google it. So what is spaced repetition? Spaced repetition is based on a simple concept. So every memory has a stability, and having a stability, every memory degrades over time. This means that at some point we forget, okay? You can think of a memory going slowly, and how slowly is based on how stable your memory is, below a threshold. As soon as it goes below this threshold, your memory disappears, okay, and you forget. That's forgetting. What spaced repetition does is that when you're about to go below that threshold, spaced repetition inserts one act of active recall to prevent you from forgetting. So it resets, let's say, this slowly descent toward forgetting. It's really nothing difficult. It's based on the principle that we all forget, and forgetting is not that much based on how, it is based on how well you read a book or how much you got from the explanation of your professor. But in the end, either you really understood how to solve that one mathematical problem, or maybe you didn't know, but you're bound to forget. At some point, you will forget. It's just how it works, okay? So many of us think, oh, okay, but I do not forget because I study so well and I do this and that. It doesn't really mean anything to your brain, okay? Like it will just slow down the forgetting curve, but you will still forget. And how do we prevent that? So before going below the threshold, you simply do one repetition of that. Why don't we forget stuff in normal life? Why don't we forget names? Why don't we forget the name of our mother or father? Because we repeat that and see that every day. So every time you do something, that's a repetition. You don't really need SuperMemo in your life as much as you need spaced repetition. And we're just using SuperMemo because right now, maybe not in the future, but right now, SuperMemo is the best software for spaced repetition. It has its flaws, but it's still the best one. Like there's no competition there. And so many people think that, oh, so do I want to use SuperMemo for everything? Like since spaced repetition can be applied to everything? Not really. For example, if you're studying programming, it is still way better to just program and screw around with the programming part, and you will just at some point remember most of the stuff. If you want to commit something very important to memory, you can put that into SuperMemo. And I use, for example, SuperMemo for incremental problem solving, which means that I'm slowly working my way up to solve some coding problems, okay? One piece at a time. And I will show you how incremental problem solving works. It's really nothing fancy. And so do we need spaced repetition in every aspect of our life? Being a med student, I see so many doctors that know so much because they repeat that every day. They do not need to study which quantity of some drug they need to give to someone, because they already know, they've done that so many times, they have repeated that so many times that they do not really need spaced repetition. The problem is that for a doctor, as in the example, if you don't use something, you're bound to forget that. So if you only use a very specific set of drugs because you treat a very specific set of patients, you're gonna forget about all the other possibilities. And when you find another patient who you usually not treat, but that day is up to you to do his therapy, what you're gonna do? Are you gonna just browse your books and the guidelines and the diagnosis algorithm all day? I mean, you already studied that in med school, didn't you? So the best thing to go around this stuff is to simply put it into SuperMemo. So you put it into SuperMemo, and with minimal work, you will retain that knowledge, if you use SuperMemo every day, for life. At least 95% of the knowledge, okay? There is no such thing as 100%. 95%, which is still enough to speed up every process, okay? So, this is my take on spaced repetition and all I think you need to know. There's really a lot to it, but this is the most important thing. You don't necessarily need SuperMemo, but you need spaced repetition. And sometimes you don't need the software or flashcards for spaced repetition, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Okay, see you in the next lesson.